complaints or concerns back. So we did go ahead and put that up on the website.
It's recording now.
Okay, thank you. Although there are so consistently there are recommendations from PennDOT and other state agencies in favor of posting the recordings. They consider it a best practice, but as yet there's no one that's provided guidance about how long we would need to retain these recordings for purposes of the sunshine law or right to know requests. So our initial proposal is that we will be holding these recordings for those requests for a period of 10 years, but we want you to understand that that is subject to change depending on the guidelines that are eventually developed for this. It may end up being a longer period. It may end up not being as long. Since it worked for the last meeting, we will try again to conduct voice votes. Again, our votes usually tend towards the unanimous. If we hit a point where it becomes confusing and it's difficult for us to determine if a motion passed or not, we will go back and do a roll call vote using the results from the roll call that we're going to conduct in just a minute or two. So, and I guess our last reminder would be that since we are working via phone, we're going to ask that you identify yourselves when you're making comments or motions. And to the extent that you can, we ask that you mute your phone when you're not speaking to cut down on the background noise for the other participants. So with those notes run through at the top of the meeting, I'm going to ask Kay to do a roll call, and we're going to do it like we did for the last meeting, where we ask her to call the members first, then the advisory members, then the staff, and then any guests. So Kay, if you'd start us off with that, please.
Sure. Okay, the voting members: Mark Calusi.
Present.
Katie De Silva.
Here.
Lisa Dooley.
Here.
Michelle Holman.
Here.
Lincoln Kaufman.
He shows us here, but he's muted.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
Hey, Lincoln, please confirm that you're here, although we do see your name, so at least your device is here. He may have stepped away too from his phone or computer or whatever he's using.
Okay, I'll keep going. Brad Kerstetter.
Here.
Sean McLaughlin.
Here.
Greg Malter.
Here.
Harry Mullins.
Here.
Steve Phillips.
Here.
Chris King.
Here.
Richard Ridgway.
Here.
Vicki Resnick.
Here.
Jim Saylor.
Here.
Justin Scabry.
Here.
Eric Staley.
Here.
Did I miss any of the MPO voting members? Okay. Advisory, Jamie Lemon. Is Jamie on the call? Do you have her, Jeff? Jamie Lemon from Federal Highway? Yeah, she's up there. She must be muted.
Yeah.
She's muted. She's muted. Okay. I hope I have these right for the guests. I don't know if I have them in order though. Beth Needham.
Here.
Patrick Matish.
Yep, present.
Todd Trout.
Pronunciation. I'm here.
Catherine Reuter. I don't think she's on. Robert Watts.
Here.
I thought he was, okay.
I'm here,
Sorry.
Kay. Thank you.
Okay, there's a Tim Smith, but I don't know where Tim is from.
Yes, Tim Smith from Gannett Fleming.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning.
And I have Emily, but I did not catch her last name from Erie MPO.
Hi, Emily Alloys, so A-L-O-I-Z.
Thank you for spelling that for me.
Yeah.
And I can't forget our staff. I have Steve Herman,
Here.
Don Keel,
Here.
Catherine Lewis.
Here.
Jeff Stover.
Yeah, I'm here.
Did I get everybody? Did I miss any? I mean, is there anyone I missed?
Chris Chapman's here sitting in from Luzerne County.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did know that you were on there. I apologize. Is it Chapman?
Yes, C-H-A-P-M-A-N.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think I have everyone, Mr. Saylor.
Also, Scott Williams, Watts MPO. I didn't hear my name.
Nope, I did forget you. Sorry.
And Jamie is on. She noted in the chat menu, Kay, that her audio is not working, but Jamie Lemon is on.
Okay, thank you, Steve. We do have a quorum, Mr. Saylor.
All right, excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Then, with that, that gets us through the call to order. Next item would be public forum. There are several members from other MPOs and other organizations. Is there anyone logged into the meeting today for the purpose of presenting public comment under the public forum item? All right, hearing none, we'll move on. The first action item, item C, is approval of the April 17th MPO minutes. These were sent out in the packet. They start on page 3. Are there any members that have changes or additions that should be considered before approving the minutes as presented? All right, hearing none, is there a member who would like to make a motion in favor of accepting them as presented?
Montour County, move to accept.
Union County, second.
All right, Greg, thank you. Sean, thank you. At this time, all in favor of accepting the minutes as presented, please signify by saying aye.
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 If there are any opposed, please signify by saying nay at this time. And are there any members wishing to abstain? All right, then hearing none, the minutes are accepted as presented unanimously. That brings us up to item T, item D, the administrative modifications and amendments. We're going to start that off with the modifications for District 2. They're on page 10 of the packet. Again, since we're working via phone, we're going to try and describe them very briefly, and I'll trust that Vicki can jump in and correct me where I have anything wrong or if I'm misstating anything. And just to summarize them, running in order that they're presented on the document, the first item brings a little bit more funding from the statewide railroad crossing funds to add to the work of the JVR crossing on SR 3006 or Business 22 in downtown Lewistown. We're taking a little bit of construction funding from the bridge over Doyle Run in Juniata County, and we're using it to start a design and right-of-way phase for the SR 103 slide project over in Mifflin County. That slide area is just west of Juniata Terrace on 103. In the next item, we're pulling money out of the bridge preservation project that covers about 6 bridges across our 3 counties in District 2 and pushing it out to a line item. The next item is putting a little bit of additional money on the Main Street Bridge construction phase in downtown Lewistown. And we're also changing the funding type for the resurfacing project on Business 3002 or 4th Street in Lewistown. It changes the flavor of the funding, but not the total amount. And then the last item is that we're adding a little bit of construction, or I'm sorry, it's right-of-way funding to the Downtown Signals project in Lock Haven to cover some right-of-way costs that have come up. Are there any questions for Vicki Rusnak on those changes as presented? All right, hearing none, is there a member who would like to put a motion forward to accept the administrative modifications as presented?
Clinton County moves.
Mark
Thank you.
Mifflin, second.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Mark. Any further discussion of the item? All right, then hearing none, we'll ask again that all members in favor of accepting the modifications as presented signify by saying aye at this time.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any members opposed signify by saying nay at this time. And are there any members who wish to abstain from this item? All right, then hearing none, the administrative modifications for the current tip in District 2 are accepted as presented. The next item is an amendment to the current tip for District 3, and it's summarized on page 12 of the main packet. So if you were logged in for the 417 meeting, you remember that we had a good bit of discussion about the local bridges included on the draft tip. Specifically, Sean McLaughlin, the representative for Union County, noticed a scoring error in our prioritization process and asked for changes to the bridges included as local projects in the tip. Since the meeting, Union County submitted comments on the tip, staff responded to the comments, and we had a meeting with the Union County representative and the county commissioners to discuss a proposed solution. Now, the letters back and forth are in the packet along with the summary tables that we developed in pulling the responses together. In the briefest possible summary of the subject is the SEDA-COG staff representative. I concur with Sean's assessment of the scoring error, and I will say right now that we commit to improving that process in the next round. Along with the scoring error, we had a scheduling issue in that we were not able to complete the prioritization process in time for the districts to draw on that and program local bridge projects in this draft tip update. That meant that the districts programmed from a mix of sources. They used the prioritization process from the last round, and they used some of the information that had been discussed at the prioritization meetings held for this tip update over last spring and last summer. I don't want to get into a point-by-point rehash of this, but when we looked at it, overall, staff feels that the process is still working. When we look back at the 2017 update, we can point at maybe 4 or 5 bridge projects that were programmed using the strategies recommended by the MPO discussion group convened to talk about how we get more bridges programmed to the tip from local projects. And when you look at the draft tip, it's almost all the projects are related to either the prioritization process, the bundling process, or the local bridge removal. So overall, we see improvement. But we also, when we look at this, as Sean pointed out, the process broke down for Union County. And we went back and looked at it, and we think we can make the changes required to give them the projects they're asking for without having to deprogram any other local or state projects. So part of that solution is this amendment to use cost savings on 2 other Union County local bridge projects to fund the study phase for the covered bridge project that was originally programmed on the draft tip. We'll be using this money in this amendment to put the study phase on the current tip. Once the draft tip that we ask you to adopt today is fully approved and we can make changes to it in October, we're going to look to move the funds that we were going to use for the covered bridge a couple years out to run a similar study phase for the truss bridge that Union County requested be included in the new tip. And we think that that's going to queue them up then for a statewide pot of funding that can be used to restore this type of historic truss bridge. Now, if there is a caveat here, it's that we've been cautioned by PennDOT that they expect to see limitations on the funding available due to the travel restrictions put in place this spring to address COVID-19 issues. But this is our best effort to address the needs put forward by Union County without making the changes at the expense of anyone else. So with that explanation of the amendment that's in front of you, are there any questions or any further discussions on this part of the solution, this item? All right, hearing none then, is there a member who would make a motion to accept the amendment as presented?
Montour moves to accept.
All right, thank you, Greg. And I'm sorry, who did we get for the second?
Steve Phillips.
Steve Phillips, thank you for the second. Is there any further discussion?
I have a question, Katie DeSilva, Clinton. In District 2 and in District 3, how big is the shortfall from the COVID so far? Can you make any kind of projection for next year? for your district?
I don't have a funding number. Scroll down here in the back section of the packet, we put a couple of notes about this. It's an item K of the packet, and what's included there is a letter that PennDOT sent to the PA congressional delegation about projected impacts. So it lays
Okay.
out up to about $1 billion of funds that they find to be at risk, but it doesn't come out and say, based on the reduction in VMT, this is exactly the number we'll think. I think we're still in a wait and see condition for that. The other item that's included under item K is, if you're familiar with streetlight data, they're a company that uses cell phone data to aggregate traffic volume information. And one of the things they've been doing during the COVID travel prohibitions is they've been posting a website that shows at a county level what your traffic volume for a particular date is compared to the average for all of January. So we went through and pulled the averages for the 8 SEDA-COG MPO counties on every Wednesday since about the first week of March through the last week of May. What we see is that for most of that period, we're down by about 40 to 50%. We think that has to be impacting fuel tax revenue. I don't think we're going to find out how severely until this fall. But again, the graphic that we put together for that's in item K of your packet. And
Thanks.
yeah, I'd invite you to take a look at it, go out and check
I
the
will.
website. And if you have any questions, shoot us an email and, you know, we can tell you how we came up with it and where we think it's headed.
Thank you.
Sure. Is there anything else that would qualify as further discussion about the motion that's on the table?
Hey, Jim, this is Sean. I just quickly want to thank you and the district staff for your efforts to come to a resolution that made the commissioners happy, that makes all of our lives a lot easier when they walk away with a smile on their face. So appreciate all the effort.
Well, I really appreciate your working with us. And, you know, again, we're going to work to make the process better in the next round. And I've got a caution that means we'll be starting the next round of prioritization meetings in very early 2021. So as members, you can look to hear from us again. Thanks again. If there are no further questions, then I would ask that all the members in favor of accepting the amendment to the current tip as presented signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, please signify now by saying nay. And are there any members that wish to abstain? All right, then hearing none, the amendment to the current tip is accepted as presented. That brings us up to the administrative modifications for District 3. Those are shown on pages 13 to 15 of the packet. Now there are 8 or 9 of these. We did try and break them into categories. And just for a very brief summary of what's going on, there were 2 or 3 items where we talked about an influx of funds from de-obligation. That means that a project was finished without using all of the money that was budgeted for it, and this is just returning that unspent money to the line items for the district. There was a move in there to add funds to the study phase for a 61 resurfacing project in Coltmont, and there were a couple of items there for 4 interstate projects where we're moving funding out of the final design phase and we're putting it into the preliminary engineering phase where it's actually needed at this time. You can't spend the money on final design before you finish the PE. We are moving some TIP funding into projects in Columbia County that we were going to use maintenance funds for and found we didn't have the maintenance funding for it. So we're just keeping them going. And then we are moving funding out of 3 projects where it wasn't needed for the utility work, where they were able to finish up without spending all the funds. We have another project, the 3012 bridge in Snyder County, where we actually have to put a little bit more utility funding in for the work that's come up. We add funds for PE phase on the 522 bridge over Beaver Creek in Snyder County. And then the last item I wanted to call out is that we're adding funds to a project on 304 in Union County to address a drainage issue that came up during the Connects process. Are there any questions for Chris King on these administrative modifications? All right, hearing none, is there a member who would put forward a motion to accept them as presented?
Union County so moved.
Thank you, Sean, for the motion. Is there a second?
Tiger County, second.
All right, Lincoln, thank you for the second. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none, then all those in favor of accepting them as presented, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any member opposed, please signify by saying nay. And are there any members that wish to abstain? Then the administrative modifications for the District 3 county shown in the tip are accepted as presented. Thank you. This is usually the section in the tip where we talk, or the section in the meeting where we talk to you about ARC local access road projects, so that you would have the opportunity to discuss any concerns with your SEDA-COG board member before those board members are asked to prioritize the projects at their meeting next Wednesday. Unfortunately, there have been no access road projects brought forward for our region. Now, Betsy is still hoping that one or two of these will emerge, but since nothing's come forward, we don't have anything to share with you at this time. And the first time we would see those will be in the December meeting or November meeting, where we're asked to support them if they're brought forward for a full application. So if you are working with someone on a development project that would support 2 or more employers, please contact Betsy Lockwood. I'd rather see those projects developed in our region than just have the items sit out there. So I think that gets us through item D. If there aren't any questions, then I'm going to turn it over to Steve to take us through item E.
Great, thank you, Jim. Moving along here, we're into item E. This is something we have to do each go around for the tip update. It's a self-certification resolution for the MPO members to pass in conjunction with the tip update. Is included the materials for this on pages 30 to 35 of the packet. And SEDA-COG MPO and all their MPOs that have an urbanized area with a population less than 200,000 people must self-certify that their planning process is in compliance with all applicable federal regulations. And that's accomplished by approval of a resolution as part of the adoption of the tip. Those of you who've been with us for probably at least past 3 or 4 rounds know this is something that we've been completing since becoming an MPO. The materials have not changed much at all from the last go around, but pages 30 to 31 of the packet are the actual resolution and walks through the regulations. Several of these are familiar to you. Title VI, Environmental Justice, Americans with Disabilities Act, Disadvantaged Business Enterprises, also the performance-based planning and programming. All those kind of regulations are covered there in the whereas sections. And then the supplemental supporting documents, Exhibit 1, start on page 32. And it spells out a little bit more with the Title VI environmental justice requirements, what the MPO and the planning staff have done to address those. Same with the DBE, Disadvantaged Business Enterprise requirements, and then the Americans with Disability Act and the fiscal constraint. And then exhibits, supporting exhibits are shown in terms of example newspaper advertisement and also a fiscal constraint chart for actions that are taken to modify the tip. So those materials are there. Hopefully you had a chance to look at them ahead of time. If there are any questions, we'll certainly entertain those now before looking to have a motion to adopt the self-certification resolution, which Jim will have signed and will have included with the submission to PennDOT along with the tip update. So are there any questions about the self-certification resolution or supporting documents? If not, do we have a motion to approve and adopt this resolution?
Montour moves to accept.
Greg Mulder, thank you for the motion. Do we have a second?
Second, Northumberland County.
Justin with Northumberland County, thank you for the second. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Nay, please.
Aye.
Oh,
Sorry.
that was another aye for the approval, I imagine. And anyone that would wish to abstain? Okay, hearing none, the motion passes, and that will be included with the other tip submission. And the tip adoption is our next agenda item, item F, in your packet. And that begins on page 37 and runs through page 44. I won't go through or dwell on a lot of this. I know we've talked about the process and the procedures, the tip update for the past few meetings, but I'll just touch a little bit on some of the items and actions that were completed during the comment period, and slight revisions that had occurred, not to the tip project listings, but for a couple of the supplemental materials. So if you go through in this section, if you looked at it ahead or looking at it now, on page 37 is a summary of some of the milestones for the public comment period. Back in April, we got approval from the MPO to take it out for comment, the draft tip. And on May 1st is when that comment period began, ran for 30 days. You'll note in the rundown there how we had advertised and consulted with and used social media, press releases, and so forth to try and capture public input and make sure that folks were aware. Obviously, with COVID-19, we had spelled out in our memo some of the measures that were going to be taken, that we couldn't, physically house the tip at sites that would normally be provided and accessible to the public. But we had electronic distribution. We had a virtual public meeting that had occurred on May 13th, and we had 12 participants on that via Skype. Carrie Mullins coordinated that for us and served as our MC and our host, and I think the platform went really well. We had a presentation we went through and opened it up for comments. So they were largely staff from PennDOT, the MPO, and some agencies that are engaged in transportation or represent interested parties. So really not general public on that, but we did have some folks that had not come out when we had physical meetings during the comment periods previously. So it was very, I think, convenient and accessible. And so we did get some higher participation than we have in the past. So that was very pleasant. And we'll probably move forward with our virtual public involvement activities in the future rounds. Then a recording of that May 13th meeting was uploaded. SEDA-COG now has a YouTube channel, so it was placed on there, and also a link on our tip page on the SEDA-COG website as well. And by the conclusion of the comment period on May 31st, we had received 3 comments. If you scroll through your packet, then on page 39, it's a summary or synopsis of those comments that were received. We already had touched on and addressed number 1, the Union County Commissioner's letter and the responses and actions have been taken to address those comments and concerns that were noted on some of the local bridges. So I won't really touch on that here at this section. The second comment was from a business owner, and he sought out some more details about State Route 150 traffic signal improvement project in Clinton County, Lock Haven. And so we had supplied that gentleman with the response and gave him more details on the status and the elements and improvements of that project. And the third was from Jamie Lemon, noting that the MOU on the tip modifications just needed a slight change to one of the definitions there. We had used a former terminology of lapse, and that should now be expiration with regard to the long-range transportation plan, and what happens in those circumstances when there is an expiring long-range plan and what that means. That was addressed, and then we got additional comments just after the close of the comment period from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and a lot of those were more pertinent to the long-range transportation plan and outreach and consultation with the other resource agencies as part of that, and for future tip development. So we did take note of those and can refer to some of the resources and options available that the Fish and Wildlife Service noted for how we can mitigate impacts to wetlands and other resources with the transportation improvements that are being done. that's a summary there. And then also page 41, we have the required documentation shown again, items 1 through 22. All of those have been completed. There were no changes, as I mentioned, to the actual TIP project listings as a result of the comment period or during the comment period. Only change was for that MOU on the TIP revisions I mentioned, and then also performance measures. PennDOT had released some guidance after we started our comment period, a new template for how we identify performance measures and best practices or recommendations that Federal Highways had put forward. So we took that into account, incorporated that. We had revised the performance measures narrative, which is now also on our TIP page. We had localized it and included projects on the TIP that would help address those performance measures. And so that step was taken, and also just more about the process for project selection, project identification, and just tailoring it to local data as well that we have available at this time. So that was taken, that step for performance measures, and the TIP checklist, which spells out all those requirements and a little bit additional detail, is included in the packet as well. That'll go along with the TIP submission to PennDOT. That begins on page 42 and runs through page 45 of the packet. So those are the main elements I wanted to hit, and just we had these included in the packet, and all the other remaining TIP documents are out on the TIP website. Change this go around because of COVID-19. We won't be mailing hard copies of the TIP documentation, but we'll be uploading it to PennDOT SharePoint site after today's meeting, assuming that the MPO approves and adopts the 2021 TIP. So I'd just like to open it up for any questions, discussion on the 2021 to 2024 TIP before we would entertain a motion to adopt it. Okay, hearing none, do we have a motion to adopt the 2021 TIP and to submit it and all the other supplemental materials to PennDOT?
Motion by Columbia County.
Okay, Eric, thank you for the motion. Do we have a second?
Second by Clinton.
I think Lincoln just barely edged you out there, Katie.
Okay, you can put whoever you want. It doesn't matter to me.
Okay, we'll give the second to Lincoln Kaufman, Snyder County. Thank you. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Oh, sorry. Any opposed, nay, please. And are there any abstentions? Okay, hearing none, the motion passes. The TIP is adopted, and we will supply all the TIP materials to PennDOT. It's also then reviewed and approved by Federal Highway Administration, Federal Transit Administration, and will take effect starting October 1st with the new fiscal year for federal fiscal year 2021. Great, thank you all for your continued engagement and involvement on it. And as Jim said, it goes around pretty quickly that we'll initiate the next process, and appreciate your focus on getting improvements in your areas and for the benefit of the entire region the MPO represents. So thank you very much. I'm going to take over for the next one and initiate the Danville area traffic study.
Yeah, that does bring us up to item G, the Danville area transportation study. We've been working on this for just over a year with the Michael. So Jeff, I'd ask that you post at this point so that he can bring up the presentation and provide a summary of that study to the MPO members.
Sure, I've got Pat actually showing up here twice, so I'm going to do it on the first page. He may have two. Pat, I'm making you host right now. That way you can share your screen as you describe the Danville area transportation study. So I just moved you to host now, Pat. You have control.
So So Patrick, jump into presentation mode. This is Todd Trout. So I'm also with Michael Baker. I'm getting a little bit of feedback from, sounds like something moving around a room possibly. So just a heads up there. So yeah, I'm Todd Trouts. Patrick's going to kind of be flipping through the slides because I'm incapable of flipping through slides. So Patrick will flip through the slides. I'll do kind of the rundown here. But I did want to acknowledge that the Michael Baker PM on this is Brian Funkhauser. He's fortunately on vacation today, so I'm kind of filling in to present the context of what is the Danville Area Transportation Study to this group. I'll start off with saying more or less that I'm not going to go into every detail. The slides that are in the package that accompanied this meeting here today, there's a lot of content in the slides. I'm not going to go through all of it, or we'll be here for at least a couple hours. But I'm going to kind of give you kind of the overview as to the framework of the study and some of the kind of the key elements of it, and kind of give you that level of information. So hopefully that's okay. I'll try to blow through this so that we have a few minutes for questions at the end. So let's get going. All right, Patrick, next. So more or less the charge from SEDA-COG when we were scoping this, like Jim said, back in May of 2019, and we're getting underway, is the Danville area is a pretty complex transportation situation. And as new land development is happening in addition to what's currently there, and as projects are coming down the road to improve the transportation system, kind of linking all that together to have a kind of a broader understanding as to where and how should we deploy projects within the area, not just in the borough, but in Mahoning Township and out up to 80 and along US 11, and also onto the southern side of the Susquehanna River, onto 54. So it is an area, it's called an area-wide study. Its footprint is large, and it also includes intersections down towards Knoebels, and also out to the east that are kind of key to the kind of the transportation footprint of that general area. So that's kind of what we set out to do. So what the study is it's a guidance document that doesn't just necessarily present issues like, say, you have a problem here, here, and here, but the idea is that it's a guidebook, so that depending on if you're with, say, the borough of Danville, the townships in the area, SEDA-COG, PennDOT, what role do you play in addressing each of these issues that are presented? What is the next first step to get moving towards that end result? Where is there funding opportunity that's realistic for the type of recommendation that is being proposed? And kind of marry all that together so you kind of walk away with not just a bunch of issues and a bunch of recommendations, but how do we move forward with this library of things? So we broke the report out into kind of 4 general issue groupings. The first is the street network connectivity. The second is the multimodal transportation, land use and development, and then traffic operations. So Patrick, move on to the next slide and I'll kind of explain those 4 things. So the Danville area is kind of tucked. This is a very general schematic of what's happening transportation-wise in the Danville area. So you have the borough down to the southwest there. You have the ridge, and then 80 on the north side of the area. You have 54 that kind of makes up the western barrier, and you have what is Caseville or Woodbine Lane, depending on what part of it you're on, kind of the eastern border of that system of transportation. On the side, you have 11 and 54. So why we picked those 4 categories to kind of highlight is the street connectivity, when kind of looking at this graphic, is understanding that we're in a box, and dealing with transportation in a box is hard. So the issues and recommendations that go towards that connectivity aspect address this concept that we have transportation in a box and a huge generator of traffic in the middle of it all, that isn't very well connected to the edges of the box, that being Geisinger. So when Geisinger is proposing to do, let's say, expansion projects to increase its services, it doesn't have much room to grow inside that box, and it has limited connections to the transportation system that's efficient. So it needs to now start looking elsewhere, which you start to get these little H's that pop up. So that's the connectivity aspect. The multimodal is, okay, understanding what this is, how do we better serve the types of trips that are on this system around the box? And then the third item is land use and development. So understanding that kind of the land use situation that we have in the borough and in Mahoning Township is kind of how it's been built out today. And as new opportunity presents itself, we need to kind of marry the two together. So when we're building or planning on development along US 11, that let's say is east of the borough, kind of heading out towards Woodbine Lane and Caseville Road, we need to understand what are the transportation challenges, so that as land use develops, we understand that we're foresightful about it and not reactionary. So then the traffic operations is, okay, all these connections are what they are. How do we make it more efficient? Understanding you got a bunch of traffic signals very closely spaced down in the borough, and you got one really big one at US 11 and PA 54. It's the bottleneck. If you go around the box, you have to go through that point. Everyone has to go through that point. So the traffic operations issues, kind of presentation and recommendations focus on that concept that there are these critical nodes or intersections that exist out there. So when sinking energy and attention into, it's trying to solve those kind of pinch points. So that's kind of get a high level of how we focused and structured the report. So Patrick, move on to the next one. Okay, so I'm not going to go through this. This is more or less the outline of the report. I think it's pretty logical, but it starts off with like, what do we do? Why do we do it? Essentially our approach to the study. It gets into the background profile. What is this Danville area now? How are people commuting in and out of the Danville area? What are its other assets, so that we have a kind of a broad understanding as to, what is the let's say, for example, the traffic operation issues there. So it's more or less a baselining is that profile part. The concerns are, okay, now that we understand the profile, now we understand what things are and aren't, where are the concerns? And that's where we get into the 4 buckets that I just kind of walked through and said, okay, in those 4 areas, what are our concerns? The recommendations then gets into, once we have our concerns, what are opportunities to address those concerns? And those are fleshed out there. The implementation then is that kind of roadmap or that guidebook to taking recommendations and moving them forward into implementation. The appendices is kind of like some leisurely reading, I would say, and or for future reference. So all outreach is a summarization of our outreach initiatives, which I'll touch upon in the next slide, is contained within there for a deeper dive, along with what we're calling location-specific transportation profiles. So when we started the project, there was actually 17 specific locations that kind of have been a thorn in District 3's and SEDA-COG's and the local municipalities, side. And there are 17 specific things or specific areas within the broader context. And so those location-specific profiles kind of more directly diagnose those 17 locations. So as to not to kind of make them part of the report, they're thrown in the appendix so you don't have, don't have another 50 pages of details, but they could be pulled out. So, when a project comes along the road, you're doing the implementation, go pull the location-specific profile to shed light on it when the opportunity comes. So that's the idea behind, the overall content there. Patrick, next. So I just wanted to address that this project was done under, let's say, oversight of a management committee. So a lot of the folks that are actually on today's call were on that management committee, but in summary, it consisted of District 3, so your local engineering district, Montour County, the Borough of Danville, Mahoning Township, PennDOT Central Office, and your SEDA-COG representatives. And maybe this is a good point too, to say that this was a PennDOT Connects. It was done under the context of PennDOT Connects, which is an initiative started probably a couple years ago at this point, to bring people together and think through their transportation projects early, so that kind of community and congealing of thought can happen before we start to get into the engineering process. So that was the management committee. We met on an every other week basis, and then we had bigger meetings on what's called a milestone basis, where we needed to kind of bounce stuff off the big group and get in person when we could get in person. And so that's how the management committee functioned. As for stakeholder engagement, there were many meetings that were held in the formats of roundtables and then interviews. So roundtables were done with the municipalities in the area. The interviews were done with major employers such as Weiss, Knoebels, Merck, and then we also did interviews with stakeholder groups, whether that's MARC, the Montour Area Recreation Commission, the school district, just to name a couple there. So that stakeholder engagement was done in the fall, early winter of 2019. And to kind of get their thoughts as to not just for those like pinch point 17 locations I talked about, but what are their grand plans when it comes to the future, so that we can marry not just existing, but with what's coming down the pipeline. So we also did traffic data. I'm a traffic engineer, but I won't get into too much of the traffic data collection, but it was part of it. And I kind of already touched upon the background profile there as what that entailed. So Patrick, next. I already highlighted what these 4 groupings were, kind of generally what they are, but just to maybe highlight a couple of like the specifics within each one of them that, and regarding concerns, was the health, was obviously Geisinger's the elephant in the room that commands a lot of attention because of its footprint, because of its employee base. It is a huge generator of traffic, and it heavily influences how people come to and through that area. And then also just want to highlight the school districts and their plans with respect to moving schools from one part of town to more of like a campus approach on the eastern side of town, and how that plays out for the connectivity. So yeah, I won't go into any more of those kind of sub bullets there. You understand generally the 4 buckets and concerns. So then moving on to recommendations, and I'm definitely not going to read all this. There were 7 recommendations that were proposed coming out of the steering committee or management committee, that is, 7 that dealt with connectivity, 3 that dealt with multimodal, 6 that dealt with land use and development, and 16 that dealt with traffic operations. So if you have the report that was transmitted with the package, you can kind of go through this to get an idea, but to give you an understanding, more or less are itemized, and it tells you what the recommendation is, some brief description as to what it is, and who is a primary and support partner with respect to each recommendation. Then there's these bullets that give you some more details for context, as to expanding upon what the recommendation is, or to kind of connect the two together, or connect one to many. So that's kind of the framework for those tables. So if you kind of flip through here, you just get an idea that each of those 4 categories got that kind of format. So keep going. So then moving on into, it's called the implementation chapter, we start off with what are the recommendations in list format. So kind of the dashboard. So what the first table is that's shown on the screen here is what we're calling a complexity matrix. Okay, great. We have 30-ish recommendations. Well, how do you weight them? Like, how is one different than the other? So understanding the differences between them, we looked at the cost in order of magnitude, right-of-way impacts, utilities, and so on and so forth, to try to differentiate between one recommendation and another, and also to identify if it's short, medium, or long-term in implementation. So this table you see in front of you is more or less sorted, listed in short to long-term order. So that's context for what this table is. So great, we understand complexity. Patrick, next. Is okay, now we understand kind of what we're up against. What's the next step? So for each of those 30-ish recommendations, it then gets into, you know, what is your first action? What's your first milestone to cross? So whether you're the borough, whether you're the township, whether you're PennDOT or SEDA-COG, you need to, where do you start? I mean, a project as big as, let's say, making a new crossing of the Susquehanna River, that's an extremely overwhelming thing to consider. But, so where do you start? So this identifies where you start and gives you an idea as to the cost of where to start. Reminds you as the responsible parties, but then this is where it starts to connect in funding opportunities. So if you, Patrick, move on to the next screen. In this orange thing, there's a 20 different funding opportunities that are identified here. So depending on what type of project and what part, like what phase of the project you're in, different funding is available for that phase of that project. So that's the kind of the crosswalk between where do you start and where is there money, or where is there opportunity to seek funding or generate new revenue with respect to doing that action. So that's the framework for that next steps table. And then the lastly is then the priority. So so now you know where to start with each one of them. Then the next question is okay, okay, what's my cookbook now? Where do I go from here? Do I start all of them at once? No, you don't necessarily need to start all of them at once. So this table is intended to communicate that sequencing of priority. So where do you start? Which one? And then where do you go after that? So I won't go into huge much more explanation than that there, but that's the idea behind that table. So I don't know if there's even any other slides other than questions, but hopefully that gave you an idea as to what the overall Danville area transportation study, where it originated from, its kind of like life cycle as to how it went and where we ended up. So I guess I'll leave it at that. Any questions? All right.
All right, then if there are no questions for the consulting team, I guess I'd like to throw in a couple notes from the staff side. We've been pleased to go through this process that we've had PennDOT, Montour County, and also Danville Borough and Mahoning Township at the table and providing input. And our assessment at the end of the study is that it's been completed on time, on budget, and it's produced the desired results. An analysis of the causes of the repetitive congestion in the Danville area and a suite of short and long-term solutions utilizing both land use and capacity improvement approaches that can be applied to address them. So the staff recommendation is that the MPO act today to accept the findings of the study. Any questions about that? Hearing none, then do we have a member who'd be willing to make a motion to accept the findings of the study as presented?
Montour County moves to accept.
Greg, thank you. Is there someone to provide a second?
Mifflin County, second.
Mark, thank you for the second. Any further discussion?
Jim, I'd just like to add a comment from Montour County. This has been an eye-opening experience for most of the folks who took part in this, and especially for the municipalities. They've been looking at these problems and had no direction. And this has been a great thing for us.
Well, we've got the first step, and hopefully with the implementation matrix that we were talking about, we'll be able to move a few of these strategies through to implementation.
That's our hope.
Any other comments from the group?
It's Katie. I was really interested in this because I used to live in Danville, moved out of there in 1975, but I lived on Red Lane about 3/4 of a mile from Geisinger, and that's where my dad worked. And I used to ride my bike all the time to Geisinger and meet him at the end of his workday, and then he would walk back and I would ride back together. And you can't do any of that now because all of Red Lane is full of housing developments from end to end. So the having visited Danville periodically over the years and seeing how incredibly built up it is, it's just really high time this happened. So it's a great study and much needed. Just for those of you who've never been there.
All right, we appreciate the comments. Anything else we should consider? All right, then hearing none, all those in favor of accepting the findings of the study as presented, please signify by saying aye.
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 If there are any opposed, please signify by saying nay at this time. And if there are any abstentions. All right, then the findings of the study are accepted as presented. I want to say thank you to the consulting team for their performance, and thank you especially to Montour County and to our municipalities in the area for their cooperation in working through this study. That does bring us through the action items portion of the agenda. Again, the staff report, the interest items, and all the other materials we put together for each item are in the appendix or in the supplemental packet that we put together. A couple of call outs. We did want to bring your attention to the fact that the staff provided comments on the projects submitted for the latest round of DCNR funding. So you'll find that under item I. There were about a half dozen projects submitted for our area. We had a notice provided by Steve that indeed the ARLI, or Automated Red Light Enforcement funding round, is going forward, and the applications for that are due on June 30th. Although we've gotten some indications that the other funding programs aren't doing as well. Green Light Go, for instance, some of the awarded projects, if they're not under agreement, they're being pulled back. If they're only under design, they're being asked to finish their design, but then submit again for construction funding in a future round. So we've put the information that we have in the reports and in the supplemental packet, and we ask you to keep an eye on that. We also included staff reports for the work going on the long-range plan update and the active transportation committee work. And we noted the items under item K talking about the funding at risk illuminated in the letter from PennDOT to the congressional delegation and the graphic that we pulled together using streetlight data. So last couple of reminders, again, we are going to look towards a longer format meeting in August, and we do appreciate that you've been able to bear with us through this virtual meeting format. Are there any questions from the group or anything you'd like to bring up for the good of the order? All right, then hearing none, we're going to adjourn the June 19th meeting at 10:38. Thank you all for your participation and for your help.
Thank you.
Guys.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Jim.
Jeffrey, don't forget to come up and see me.
All right, Steve, I'm going to have to do that.